much for all the support you gave me, guys.
Okay.
Today, I got promoted.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
As we celebrate World Children's Day, we're talking today to Ms. Kavindya Thennakoon, the co-founder and head of product at Tilli, the developers of the popular social emotional learning tool. Kavindya also has an MA in Learning, Design and Technology from Stanford School of Education. And in 2015, she was even presented with the Queen's Young Leaders Award for her work with Without Borders. So thank you very much, Kavindya, for joining us today to talk about how education is and can be used as a tool for inclusivity. Thank you very much for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Kavindya, starting off, we're seeing a lot of children and young people really standing up for a more equal and inclusive world. So if we try to indulge ourselves a little bit, how do you envision this equal, inclusive world to be?
Yeah, I think this is such an important day also to be having this conversation. I think what we've seen over the past sort of decade almost is seeing a lot of children and young people, school-going young people being involved in civic spaces, coming out and asking for better quality of education, having a say in sort of the political happenings in their country, and especially with the climate movement that's happening across the world, you've seen a lot of kids and young people being involved. And I think that's such a positive move, because I think we've always envisioned children and kids, children and young people to be passive recipients of everything that adults do, the decisions that adults make. And I think to see them involved in policymaking is such a brilliant turn of events, not just for a given community, but I think for us as the world. And I think for me, what I envision as sort of an inclusive and just world for children and kids, I think for me, I see it in three spaces. One is education, that we have education systems that gear towards this changed child and young person, because it's not the same young person that sort of our parents' generation saw, where it was enough to learn how to count and read. Now you need a more robust set of skills and values that a child learns by the time they leave school. And now we have alternatives to school. We have kids who, don't go to school in a traditional sense. So how education, gears towards that changed child. And then secondly, nutrition, that children is able to access the needed nutrition they need in a given day. And thirdly, most importantly, something that's very personal to me is child safety, that we have an environment that children are physically safe, that they have the skills that they need to decide their boundaries around them, their bodily autonomy, and to really lead a life that is free from mental trauma, because things that happen in your childhood around sort of sexual abuse continue with you later on in their life. So I think education, nutrition, and safety, I think for me, those are those big three pillars of how we can make the world better for kids.
Yeah, that's a very holistic picture. How far away are we from this picture?
Yeah, I think obviously, if we take from a historical view at the status of the child from, let's say, maybe the First World War, the Second World War, and so on, obviously we've had tremendous progress in bringing children out of poverty. Even in the South Asian region, we've had a lot of progress in terms of nutrition. We've made immense strides in sort of vaccinating our kids, education access. The number of children out of school has dramatically reduced if we take sort of a historical overview of how progress has been. But I think we're very far away from sort of that world that I just described to you. I think the biggest blow that, if I just focus on children, that we faced was COVID, because COVID really pushed back a lot of that progress that we had made in education, in nutrition, in child safety, and so on, because we've had almost sort of a large population of around at least 370 million children, even now either only partially in school or completely out of school. And then if you look at a second grader, they've sometimes never come to a school. They've never been in a classroom setting, and they've dealt with so much trauma and death for almost sort of 2 to 3 critical years of that development window. So I think mental health is plummeting. So this impacts almost 1 in every 7 children now report that they're depressed. So think about it, like a child saying that, they don't have an intention to live anymore, that they're feeling depressed and anxious is not the kind of world we want to live in. So I think there's so much to be done, both in terms of funding and policy making, to really understand that the world has changed, that we're dealing with a very new set of problems. And I think we don't acknowledge that changed world and design policies for that changed world. I think we're just taking multiple steps backwards.
So true. It's such a depressive picture.
Yes.
You're in education. What do you think is the role of education to ensure that these children all over the world enjoy rights and equality so that they can grow up to be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, I think for me, I think initially when I started the research that led to what Tilli is today, my biggest motivation was a very simple question. I thought to myself, if you take every perpetrator of sexual violence, assault, gender-based violence, they've most probably been through a classroom at some point in their lives. They've met a teacher at some point in their lives. They've passed through the gates of a school at some point in their lives. Then if I take, on the other hand, survivors of violence, they've also been through a classroom or a school or a learning setting at some point in their lives. And I think what I realized that was there's so much potential in these spaces of learning, whether it's a classroom or a preschool or a university, to really break those cycles of violence. And that's one of the key sort of problems that I am trying to fix in how learning is done. And I think in that sense, classrooms, especially my focus is on primary education. So we're looking at K through 5, so preschool till grade 5, looking at, all right, so what are like those fundamental skills and values that a child needs to ensure that they don't fall into that cycle of violence, that if they faced a situation of violence in their life, that they're able to break through that cycle. And if they're in an unsafe situation, either their family or the community, that they have those values and skill sets to decide how to set those personal safety boundaries, how to say no, how to seek help. So I think that was sort of that core question of how do we make learning in a way that it gives the children the skills they need to survive in the world as it is now. And whether it was social emotional learning or sexual and reproductive health, education, whatever that meant. So how do we give those skills for them to be safe, healthy, and happy? So I think for me, that's the role I see in learning and education, of what we can do.
Such a role change from what education used to be when we were small to what it should be today.
Yeah.
Kavindya, looking a little at the Sri Lankan picture, what kind of changes do you think are necessary in the short term, medium term, or long term to ensure that children enjoy inclusivity?
Yeah, I think some of sort of the more immediate, or rather like low-hanging fruit, because obviously we are working within very constrained budgets. We have less than 6% of GDP in the country allocated to education. So we're working with a very limited set of resources here. I think one of the things is there's no point in trying to fix middle school. There's no point trying to fix like A levels and O levels or university if the foundation is broken. Which is why we say early childhood education is the backbone of any education system. And it's, in fact, the backbone of sort of the economy of the country, the well-being of the country. And we still don't have a robust policy of how sort of that preschool system is designed. So the Montessori system, we really don't have any policies in place to decide what happens to a child's early education before they come into grade 1. So I think we need a robust set of policies, regulations, and quality standards for the kind of learning centers and preschools that we have currently in the world, in Sri Lanka, of deciding what should a child know in terms of basic literacy, social emotional competencies before they reach grade 1. So I think that's a huge step towards the right direction if we can get that in place. And I think for me, the second thing is there has been certain policy language in Sri Lanka saying, all right, we need to talk about social emotional learning. We need to incorporate, besides STEM, we need to have a robust curriculum around social emotional learning, train our teachers, put activities and curricula in place. But I think we need to, have that policy built in a more robust way, and also have the necessary budgeting allocations done. And I think for me, the third thing is sexual and reproductive health education. I think bringing in age-appropriate sex education is a must to any society or community, because what we're seeing is, children are reaching puberty sooner than what was happening 50 years ago. So sort of our biological cycles are almost changing as time goes, as societies change. So I think we need to adapt to that. And we're also seeing, because of digital access, children are learning about words like sex and Googling up some of these terms much sooner. And it would be much better if they learn about it in the correct way at school, rather than learning it from sort of some website on the internet that might communicate really the wrong picture and wrong kind of information. So I think those are the three things I see. Social emotional learning, having a robust early childhood education policy, and bringing sex ed starting from grade 1 in an age-appropriate way.
Thank you. Yeah. It's going to be a steep climb, but I really hope we do it.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. Thank you so much. You've given us a lot of very new and very holistic perspectives to kind of think of children and how education should be that game changer to ensure an inclusive world.
I really appreciate you making this time, and thank you for giving me a platform to talk about something I talk about 24/7. And I'm glad you were here to listen to me go on about learning and education. So thank you so much.
It was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Kavindya. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much to all our viewers for joining us on this special segment on Children's Day. Until next time, take care.